Forewarning. Are you ready?
Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2.
Morning.
Call to order our April the 21st meeting, 9 o'clock meeting. First off, we're going to have a call of order. For some of our councilmen are not here, but they'll be joining us through other ways and means. Councilwoman Harris, are you here?
I'm present.
Councilman Nern?
Present.
Councilman Corbett?
Here.
Councilman Phillips?
Here.
Councilman Borman?
Here.
All right. Let's stand and say pledge of allegiance.
Can you do me a favor real quick before that and check and make sure that Councilman Borman and Councilman Phillips could hear Ms. Harris?
Councilman Borman and Councilman Phillips, let me know by a nod of your head if you can hear Councilwoman Harris.
Yes, heard her.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, good deal. All right, pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And to which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up will be our amendment and approval of the draft agenda. Councilman Phillips, do you have anything?
No.
Councilman Borman?
No changes.
Councilwoman Harris?
No.
Councilmember Corbett?
No changes.
Councilmember Nern?
No changes.
All right. Then do I have a motion to accept
I move we accept the agenda.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's
Aye.
Ms. Harris, Mr. Borman, Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Gotcha. Thank you. Moving on. First up is our presentation of the draft project agenda. Mr. Robert Neal, you have?
Conflict of interest. Ask about a
Oh, yeah, I'm
conflict
sorry.
of
I
interest.
apologize. Does any member of the council have a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with anything regarding any items on the agenda? If so, please state at this time. Representative Phillips?
Nope.
Councilman Borman?
No.
Councilwoman Harris?
I do not.
Councilman Nern?
No.
And Councilman Corbett?
No.
All right, now moving on. Mr. Neal, you now have the floor, please, sir. Speak in the microphone best you can, please, sir.
I didn't turn it on. Test it. You gotta hold it down and turn it on first.
Council Mayor, appreciate the opportunity to be here and
Speak closer.
a little closer.
Yeah,
How's that?
that's better.
Okay. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and just want to give a quick update on the navigation project, where we stand. And I guess next slide, we'll just go through the discussion. The items that I want to talk about and sort of where we're at is first just review the permit status, where we are as far as obtaining the permits to actually go to construction. The items that will be standing out there are the beneficial reuse material placement site, where we're going to put the beach compatible sand, and then the the Corps of Engineers permitting process. Those are the two steps that we lack. Assuming those will be completed relatively soon, we'll talk about the next steps and the process for getting to construction. So just very quickly next, yes. The project, as you're aware, South Jinks Creek, the feeder canal system, the Bay Area and Finger Canals. CAMA, the state, has issued their permit with the variance. Their permit includes the variance now, allowing dredging to -6. But their permit, in that request, we stipulated that beach-compatible sand would be placed on Sunset Beach between 5th and 12th Street. Due to, so the permit status now, we have the state permits in order we could actually go to construction. But as you're aware, the property owners in that area between 5th and 12th were not willing to accept the material. We don't feel like easements would be obtainable. So we are looking to move that beach placement site, and that will require a major modification to the CAMA permit. So with that, talk about the next slide, just the process that we're going through in order to obtain that or identify that next, that other material placement site, we looked at sites on Sunset Beach, including Palm Cove, where they're suffering some erosion. On the bay side, however, our state rules will not allow for us to put public sand on private property and cover theirs on that bay side. So we approached them about putting sand on the ocean front. They also were unwilling to accept, at least through initial conversations, appeared that easements would be difficult to obtain. So we reached back out to Ocean Isle Beach to see if they would take the sand. They are willing to accept the sand. They obviously, that the material is not of a sufficient volume that it would benefit. They feel that it would be a significant benefit to them, so they're willing to accept the sand, but not pay for the sand, not pay for any of that construction cost, nor for obtaining the easements. So we're working with their consultant and with the town. We have identified a site that we feel like maybe it is an erosional site by their consultant. They are suffering some small degrees of erosion. The state actually says they're accreting, so it's a stable area. But we are reaching out to those property owners to see if they would be willing, if we could use their ocean front as a placement site. Again, there'd be no cost to them, and town of Sunset Beach would be responsible for obtaining those easements. But we're reaching out to them to see what is the potential of that. The reason we're looking for that beach placement site is the state rules require all beach compatible material to be maintained in the system, in the littoral system of that inlet. So we have to either place the material on Ocean Isle Beach or Sunset Beach. If both islands say no, they don't want the sand, if both shorelines say no, then we can look to take the sand somewhere else to another beach. But first, we feel like we need to satisfy that rule and try to place it in the adjacent beaches. If both islands say no, we would need to go back to the CRC for another variance request in order to go away from the state rules. But if both islands say no, then I would expect that would be a little objection, be little to no objection in order to take that sand somewhere else. But right now, we believe we have a site identified on Ocean Isle Beach. We are working with those property owners, and one benefit to using this site on Ocean Isle Beach is the town has provided surveys, so that's less field work for us to classify that site. Per state rule, we need to survey our placement area and collect sediment samples and test those sediment samples of the native beach. So the town has provided those surveys for us, so that's an additional cost that we will not need to go back and do again. The sediment samples, we believe we can go out and pretty much collect on our own. It's 13 samples. It's 65 samples total. There's 5 profile lines and 13 samples each. So it's about 65 samples total that we would need to collect, but those can go out and just in a Ziploc bag, just take a handful of sand and Ziploc it and go get. We believe that at this point, the only additional cost would be testing those samples, which is relatively simple. It's compared to actually mobilizing the vessels out to survey it. So there would be some additional cost that we'd be looking at, but the majority of that cost would be reduced in using this site because it's no surveys, there's no vessel operation. It's a one-man job going out and putting sand in a Ziploc bag. But next slide, we'll look at the actual beach placement site. This is, we want to stay as close to the inlet as possible. The blue line on the drawing shows the area that we want to permit. This is the area that we want to permit this entire area for beach placement because the red area is the red line shows the shoreline that we need. That is based on 2016 surveys. That would be the only shoreline that we would need. However, 2016 to 2020, we feel like there's been some more material shoaled into South Jinks Creek. So we think that area is going to expand. So we're going to permit the entire blue line, be ready to place material within the shoreline of where the blue line reaches. That also covers the survey area. They have 5 profile lines over that blue line. So if we permit that entire blue line, we don't have to go out and do any additional surveys. So that permitting a larger area actually reduces the cost of the project. And we're actually working with town staff and Ocean Isle Beach to identify these property owners, to contact them, and to see if they would indeed be willing to accept that sand. We expect that process to go through the month of May, but we think we can resolve it within the month of May and then turn around and submit a permit. We've contacted DCM, the state, to see if they had any concerns over this area. Again, their data, their science says that this is an accreting or stable shoreline. The consultant, the town's data says it is a slightly erosional shoreline. And that comes back to what data you want to look at. But we have to assume that it is a generally stable to slightly erosional shoreline. And hopefully the property owners see a benefit into receiving this sand, assuming that it's no cost to them. We're hopeful that they can see that benefit and allow us to place that material there. So that would take care of, we've talked to the state. They have not expressed concerns over placing that material there, assuming that the property owners are willing to accept the material. We believe we can turn the modification request back around to the state within the month of May, and that would include collecting the sediment samples and testing the samples, and then provide that information to the state so that by the month of May, they could start, at the end of May, beginning of June, they could start the review process. If they started the review process the 1st of June, we could have a permit modification. The state permitting would be rectified by beginning of August. So that would, for the state side of things, or mid-August, excuse me, by mid-August, we would be ready for construction on the state side. We would have all permits in place. On the state side, that would leave open the Corps of Engineers permitting process. Next slide, please. They, as you are aware, the Corps required a, generally the Corps process follows the CAMA process. It's a joint permitting process. For Jinx Creek, they decided to pull their permit and go and make us go through the individual permitting process. So they didn't follow the state, they didn't follow their usual path. That decision was made based on the volume of comments received from the CAMA permitting process. In other words, a lot of the beach placement, because of the beach placement site, because of the concerns the property owners had, because of the concerns that have been throughout this project for dredging South Jinx Creek, those comments that came in, the Corps decided they wanted their own permit, they want to do their own review process. So what that means is the Corps, the federal permitting process, has additional requirements for the purpose and need of the project, as well as an alternative analysis. It's very similar to an EIS. We've heard talk about environmental impact statements, what that process would be. This is a very similar process, and where we need to justify the purpose and need, as well as go through alternative analysis. That work has been done through this entire design process. We need to document that. We're in the process of that. However, the key item that we need for the Corps permit is the same as the state permit, and identify that beach placement site. So the entire holdup for the Corps process at this point is the same as the state. We need to identify a beach placement site, and then we'd be ready to submit that paperwork as well, that permit application as well. The alternative analysis, the purpose and need is pretty, it's well documented at this point as far as the modeling that we've done. The way we chose to alleviate or remove North Jinx Creek from the project was all part of the alternative analysis, and even going through the variance process was recommended by the agencies as part of an alternative analysis. So those processes are well documented. The only addition we need to make is to satisfy the Corps permit, is again to notify or to select and identify an appropriate beach placement site for our material. They do have a longer, let's see, next slide, please. The Corps has a longer permitting process. They are 120 days versus the state's 75. So if we, again, submitting at the same time with the state by the end of May, the process could extend through October or into October before we could expect a Corps permit, a federal permit. However, understanding that both the agency, we're hopeful that since the state agencies correspond regularly with the federal agencies during the review process, that hopefully the Corps process will mimic the states and we can have a decision in August. It will rely significantly on the number of comments that are expressed, assuming that the beach placement site is acceptable, that the residents of Ocean Isle Beach want the material. We expect that the comments would be considerably less than what was last time, and we're hopeful that we can circumvent a lot of that federal process and expedite that it would be the same as the state issues, the state timeframe, the review timeframe. So we're hopeful that we can have both permits in August, assuming we can submit and identify that. Assuming the beach placement site on Ocean Isle Beach that is currently identified works, then we're hopeful that we can have the permits for both federal and state by mid-August. And then that would allow us, to put us in a position from the permitting side of things to go to construction as early as mid-November. And that's where we would, next slide, please. And that brings us to the next steps is how we want to reach construction in November from the permitting standpoint. If we want to maintain that coordination, maintain that dialogue between the state and the Corps of Engineers and both offices in Wilmington, so we see these people on a regular basis, identify their concerns, and assuming that the site we have identified as beach placement works out, we think we can work through that process. And then once the permits are submitted, assuming they have no concerns and the process looks like it's moving forward, we would come back in July and start preparing for that construction. That's a little bit ahead of schedule before the permits are issued, but if we start in July, we can redo surveys, update the construction plans, update the construction estimate, because again, we need to account for this volume. Look to see if additional volume has accreted in South Jinks Creek and what would be our construction cost at this point, as well as preparing the construction plans and specifications and updating the construction estimate, soliciting the contract bids, and then selecting a contractor and having them ready. Our permits allow us to start work as early as November 16th, and we would prepare at this point, put the goal as having everything in sight and ready to go at November 16th, assuming town council chooses to move in that direction. But that is the update as of right now. We're still, the main take-home points is we're working with Ocean Isle Beach to identify the beach placement site. Once we identify that beach placement site, the final beach placement site, then we're full steam ahead, submit permits, do our settlement sampling, submit both state and federal permit applications, and look to have results back in August, while in July moving forward with updating the construction plans and construction estimate. And I'll open up at that point if any questions or.
Councilman Borman, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Robert, so since it seems that the Army Corps has 2 points, the beach placement as well as the rationale for South Jinks. You mentioned during your presentation that you have everything that you need for the South Jinks portion. Has that been shared at all with the Army Corps to see whether they're accepting of it, or that we won't have any additional problems there once we get the beach placement thing resolved?
We're having that dialogue. They won't officially review it until we include that beach placement site. So it's, we can't submit an incomplete, they won't look at an incomplete application, and without a approved or documented beach placement site, the permit would be incomplete, and they'll tell you that, yeah, if you do this, this, and this, we're good, but until they see the details, it doesn't work. So to answer your question is, we've inquired or said, if we move this beach placement site or any other additional concerns, they obviously they have not seen any written documentation or draft reports. We've not shared that information with them, but we're confident at this point, from our previous conversations with them, that those issues are covered. But no, to your question, we have not specifically shared the documentation with them. We've more just asked, what do you think about this?
Because during the last meeting with them, they said that they wanted some of their experts to review the modeling data. I don't know if that was specifically towards South Jinx or the whole project, but that was another thing that they had asked for.
Right, and the modeling itself, we can provide that, but it will not be, we don't anticipate using the modeling to support the project, because the modeling didn't look at what we're doing. So it will be a larger scale. We will provide them that modeling report, and I think that's probably a good idea. We'll inquire at this point to see if they want to see it, but I don't anticipate that the modeling will really help justify, and that's why we didn't include it in the first submittal. They want to look at the modeling to see if additional tidal flows could be expected with dredging just South Jinx Creek, and that we don't need the model to justify or comment on that.
No, I guess it was more that it was something specifically that they asked for, and looking to check off all the boxes so that there's no more delays. That was the reason for the question.
Understood. Yes, sir.
You have any more, Mr. Borman?
No, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Councilman Phillips, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you for the update.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Number one, what is the additional cost of placing the sand on Ocean Isle Beach? I assume it's going to cost quite a bit more as a result of the new placement site. Do we have any idea of the cost?
Not necessarily. It's not additional cost, because the cost for the placement is determined by the length of the pipeline. And the length will actually be about the same as going to between 5th and 12th Street. So the pipeline length is the same, and it is putting the material on Ocean Isle Beach. So Sunset Beach doesn't have that benefit of the project, that secondary benefit of beach placement. Ocean Isle receives that benefit, but additional cost, it's minimal, if any. We can look at that, but it's I would say minimal.
Second question, to place that sand on Ocean Isle Beach, you'll have to run piping across properties to get the sand to its location. Will all those properties give consent to allow that to happen?
That's the process we're in now, as far as determining those easements and is this an acceptable site? That is the last step.
Okay, and the last question is, the Army Corps of Engineers asked for specific data to support what this project wants to do. have you worked on the specific data that the Corps has requested? Where does that stand?
Yes, that data is already, that's been collected. They just wanted it documented in a more profound format, I'd say. So that process has been done. Again, it's a part of submitting an incomplete application is what we're trying not to do. The review process won't start on the federal side until we identify the beach placement site, but the documenting the purpose and need and alternative analysis, that we have that data, it's just a matter of compiling it in a format that the Corps wants to look at.
Anything else, Councilwoman Harris?
Not for Mr. Neal. I have a question for the council.
Go ahead.
Why are we at this time moving forward with these additional costs when we're in the critical situation that this nation is in, and our town is in the same situation?
Would any of the councilmen like to address that? Councilman Borman?
From what I understand, Jan, the funds for this have already been collected. So I don't see it taking away from any of our current concerns in terms of the budget. But I raised that to Tara as well.
Councilman Phillips? You have any comments?
One of my main thoughts and rationales to support the dredging project initially was to support housing values. Given the current state of things, I feel that the housing values would still benefit from this dredging project. Therefore, I think that's why, from my perspective, why we should still continue to move forward.
Councilman Nern, do you have any comments?
I think bringing this question up is another attempt to delay the project and increase the cost, which has been done over and over again.
Is that all, sir? Councilman Corbett?
My view is that based on the presentation that Mr. Neal gave us today, is that additional cost at this point in time are nominal. So that's not a critical factor here. What is critical is that we continue to go ahead and get the process so we can put in get the final application into the Corps of Engineers, get the approvals, and then be in a position to finalize, determine what the construction costs are going to be, hold a public meeting, and get on with this. As I said, I don't see any reason. I don't see a reason at this point in time to delay. The costs going forward still are minimal. So I would encourage the council to approve continuing the process. I do have a question though for Mr. Neal.
Okay,
Finish this topic first.
Okay. Anything else, Councilman?
No.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilman Corbett.
My concern reflects also one of the questions that Councilwoman Harris asked concerning the property owners and the easements. What I kept hearing there was the word hope. So has any discussion yet been had with the council, with the property owners? And has a presentation or proposal been put together to explain to the property owners the benefits, the lack of negative impact, and why they should support that? What we ran into here was being totally unprepared to communicate with the property owners as to the benefit and value, and the information flow that responded was questionable facts in response, but the impact on the property owners was almost unanimous, that they immediately came up and opposed any action on our beach. You know, we've got to be proactive to adjust this so that it doesn't happen. And so if nobody's been talked to, this is a really sensitive portion of the process, to convince the people at OIB that this free sand is a benefit to them.
Correct, and that's where it comes in. Obviously, if the shoreline is eroding, then I think the benefit is, if they see the shoreline as erosional, then they see the benefit will be greater. But to answer your question, we are working with the town of Ocean Isle Beach and have a letter of support from them. They support the project. Also working to identify the property owners right now, so we can establish that contact. Working with town of Sunset Beach staff in order to do that, to start those conversations. So yes.
Is there a difficulty identifying the property owners?
Well, getting
You
their
could probably
address,
do it
yes.
in about an hour and a half, looking at the Brunswick County taxpayer records to identify the principal owners.
Because they have the mailing addresses. Most of these are secondary homes, so we not only have to identify the individual properties, but their primary addresses, and that's where we've asked town staff to assist, and that's been only in the last week. But
Those are in the county tax records
yes, indeed.
for each one of them. I mean, and like I said, you go to the GIS, you hit the property address, it pops up, and you've got the address for the address or record for these folks. So it should be a pretty quick process.
And if I may, real quick, we're doing that, but we're also checking the tax scroll for any recent changes. So it's still a matter of identifying all those properties, including the ones in the area and the ones with the pipes going to have to cross to get there. It is a little bit more than an hour's worth of work, but it's being done.
And how many properties are we talking about?
There's at least 63 property owners within our permitting area, and then outside of that would be the easement for the pipeline. So
It's about 100.
yeah.
Okay, that would be more than an hour, yes.
Any other questions, Councilman Corbett, or comments?
Is the Corps of Engineer going to ask for another, put a time delay for another 30-day comment period like they did last time we
It's very
we
possible.
presented something to them? Yeah,
It's very possible, and it's very possible, yes.
okay. So your timelines are also pretty optimistic.
Well, the 120-day review period for them
Would include that?
would include that, yes.
Okay. Um,
Anything else, sir?
Do it quickly, please.
Councilman Nern? Go ahead, sir.
I don't have any specific questions for Mr. Neal, but I just can't believe we're giving beach compatible sand away. That's it.
Okay. In all due personal respect, sir, I just got a couple of questions for you.
got it. Get to the mic.
I know that I don't have a vote in this, but I do on here, so when I'm asked out in public, I can tell. In one meeting before, I asked you about that when we were talking about the sand issue, which we're going to be going through Ocean Isle, checking with homeowners. I asked you about the homeowners here, and you told me at that time that it was your company's fault, that it was poor judgment on y'all, that y'all didn't go through with it. This time when you go through this through Ocean Isle, should we expect a lot better this time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, as I sit here and listen to you, I hear a lot of if, and ifs.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just don't see how we can continue to go forward. Number one, first find out if we can put the sand there beginning. I think we need to know that up front before we take another step. That needs to be something that's of importance to getting before we go through these things. But let me ask you a question on this, and this is your professional opinion on this. If we would have went through there, if we would have went back, when you got turned down from the Army Corps of Engineers, if we was to go back now and it ended up being 2 instead of 5, do you think that would make any difference in their decisions? Or do you think it doesn't matter either way on that?
As far as the dredge depth?
Yes, sir. I was just saying, do you think that would make a decision different than what they were going to decide, or does it not matter about the depth?
As far as they would still need a beach placement site. Still have to.
I understand that.
But yes, it would, they, because of the controlling depth in North Jinks Creek, yes, they would see the project quite differently if it was -2 instead of -5 or 6.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted it for myself. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll just mention that this presentation will be on the website with the rest of the dredging information.
Okay. All right, Mr. Neal. Thank you so much, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our council discussion. Councilman Phillips, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Councilman Borman?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Councilwoman Harris?
No, I do not.
Councilman Nern?
No, sir.
Councilman Corbett?
2 quick questions. Do we have, in a previous meeting, the replacement of donated items at the town park was brought up. Have we made any progress to finalize what our approach would be?
We did. We contacted the previous donors and both accepted to redonate.
Redonate?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about new plaques and stuff
Nope.
like that? Okay. The second one is, I think the last Jaguars Lair update was in December. Yeah, are we do another update?
It is quarterly. We'll look into that and see if we didn't get it. It would have been about the same time everybody was shutting down that we should have gotten it.
Okay. Just didn't want to forget that one.
Right.
Okay. That's all I had.
That's all the discussion. All right, moving on to the next step. We have our public comments on agenda items only. We have received some that I'll be reading, but if I'm not mistaken, we have some people in the back room live, so we will allow them to go first. Remember that it's a 3-minute speech on those, so just let me know when you're ready. Please speak your name and your address, please.
Hi, I'm Ray Voidod. I live on the west end of Sunset Beach. First, I want to say that...
What's your address, sir?
It's 401 39th Street. Thank you. First, I want to say that I had put up a sign that said to liberate Sunset Beach, and I want to point out that Councilwoman Harris took the time to contact the police to take it down because it was about 6 inches on the property of the town, where about a million other signs are for construction, for real estate, and so on. And of course, no public side parking was not obstructing anybody, so it was the content of the message, but we took care of that and retrieved the sign and erected it back up on our property. We protest the closure of the beach. Don't think it follows any microbiology, doesn't follow any epidemiology. You've got people going to the store, they're congregating, they're way within the 6-foot margin. We've got construction going on, very good construction crew, very good company, very complimentary and very good with us, but they had crews behind us of 30 people sometimes, all working together, touching each other when they're putting up pieces of wood and headers and so on. That's right behind us. So the idea that the beach being closed is somehow protecting us just doesn't follow any common sense, and it doesn't follow any science either. In fact, what we did when it was closed so that the access points were only 2 points, it funneled everybody onto 2 points, so they had to pass each other on the boardwalks. So now what you have is you got a beach closed to satisfy the fears of some people, and everybody's walking on the road, passing each other, biking on the road and so on. And I'm not against any of it. I'm not even against the construction crews behind us because I don't believe a lot of the science was known. So now this was acceptable when it first came out because nobody really knew what was going on. So we knee-jerked to closing the beach out of fear's sake. But the fact of the matter is right now that there's no reason for the beach to be closed. In fact, it should have been more open access for people to get on there. When we walked it, and we walked it every single day, we never saw anybody that was violating the stay away from each other orders, the social distancing term I'm coming to learn to hate. So I go every single day, I go out to either Lowe's to get building supplies for what I'm doing at my house, or I'm going to the grocery store. I've gone to Home Depot. I've gone to the hospital twice, not COVID-related issues, where I'm around people who apparently have are testing positive, so I'm at a higher risk. In this society, we should be very careful about abrogating the rights of people, the civil liberties of people, out of a sense of fear. We're not following any science. Closing down the beach is actually a detriment. There's been science that has been put out that says that sunshine affects the virus in a very positive way in that it kills it. It's covered by a fatty cover on the outside of the nucleus, and that kills the virus. And so walking along the beach would probably be the safest activity, yet it's the one thing we've restricted. So now,
Sir, respectfully, your time's up. I'll let
Okay.
you finish up if you want to tie it off.
Yep. I just would like the beach to be opened up so that we follow. South Carolina is opening up early, and I would like the beach to be opened back up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay. No more comments from Mayor. Now I will read out the comments that have been sent in. I think I have looked through all of them, and I think all of them are the agenda ones. Some of them are long, so I'll be as brief as I can, hit the main points. A lot of them will be alike, but the ones that have names, I'll call the names out. The few of them do not have names, so I'll just do the best I can with who it's from. Starting first.
Excuse me,
excuse
Mr.
me.
Mayor, if there's no names, they should not be read.
Well, it's an email.
I don't care. Their name should be on there and their address.
All right, so I'll just say this is one that's that's right in line with some of the rest of them, so it's basically that. All right, moving on. The next.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to hear what those people had to say. If there was an email address, that's good enough.
It's really just a very simple one.
It may be good enough for you, but it's not good enough for me. We have rules here.
It's still
We're
from a
trying-
citizen of our town.
Okay, and we have rules here.
I'm gonna read it because it's basically one sentence, and all it says is, please consider opening the beach for us who need exercise, walking, jogging, walking our dogs. Thank you. Moving on to the next one.
Who sent it? Who sent it? What was the email?
M. Rickard. M. Rickard. Next is from a Gabby von Norheim, if I'm pronouncing that right, Sea Trail resident. Would it be possible to reopen the beach to walkers, joggers, and bicyclists on a limited basis? Possibly mornings 7 to 10 and evenings 5 to 7 using the previous 2 limited access points. Next one is from Robbie Cox, 415 29th Street. Please reconsider limiting open the beach access and beaches for residents and property owners. Allow dogs before 8 and after 6. 9 to 6 for walkers, bike riders, surfers, runners, fishing. Hold off on tents, sunbathing. Gradual and safe. Thank you to the staff. Next up is Larry Zaborski, 704 Riverside Drive. Once the beach opens, are you still considering limited access on both sides of the pier? If so, I would like to recommend that you implement one way in and one way out on the east and west sides. The limited access implement previously did not allow for proper social distancing due to the narrow width of the beach access boardwalks. Thank you. Next up is John Sink. It's time to safely reopen Sunset Beach. The restrictions relating to the vacation rentals could be extended 2 more weeks, but there is no reason to restrict homeowners from the island. South Carolina has reopened theirs, as has Jacksonville, Florida. The COVID-19 peak has passed, and it's time to walk our beach. Next up it's from KH. I propose that you find a way to open the beach for walking and biking. Next up is Cindy Borders. I would like to express my appreciation for the proactive steps taken by town council and the mayor during this time of unprecedented health uncertainties. Please continue to use the available recommendations from our health experts to protect our residents of Sunset Beach. Sylvia Chester, Sea Trail resident. Please don't follow suit with Wrightsville Beach and Holden Beach by reopening our beach. It is too early, and we have done well in our community by social distancing and staying at home. Next up is a Catherine, Prete, 426 Sailfish Street. I am a full-time resident new to Sunset Beach. I retired here last year after spending family vacations here for 30 years. I have gone to the beach every day I have been here. We could have one boardwalk open so I could look at the water. Do you know when we will actually be allowed on the beach? Next one up is Mary Young, homeowner on Sunset Beach Island. Please reopen the Strand to exercising like OIB and Holden Beach did. Hopefully a soft step. I realize that you have only 7 police department employees, and I guess this is 4 maintenance people at a time, but I think it could be easy to enforce. I know a group of walkers who would be happy to be back on the beach. Next up is Cindy Levine, 1834 East Main Street. Just says, I hope you find this email, everybody's well. I'm sure you're struggling. Let's see. I appreciate that all y'all do. I personally believe the beach should be open. Those that are worried about contact and violence have a right to stay at home. Right now, those of us that are capable of following guidelines and enjoying the beach at the same time are not given the same opportunity. As an operation nurse, I understand sterile disease transmissions quite well. I believe that in spite of all the good intentions, we are all at risk at Food Line, and I am unclear why it was closed in the first place. There's no scientific evidence. A few days that we were restricted on the beach, we could go on the beach when it wasn't closed. I found everyone complying. From what I've seen, police officers in town, they are more than capable of ticketing anyone not adhering or whatever restrictions you decide. Why not start there? Open the beach, have guidelines, then enforce them. Next up is Vicky Harbor, full-time resident, Sunset Beach. Thank you for all the efforts to protect the citizens of Sunset Beach, part-time residents, folks from neighboring towns, and visitors. You have had to make some difficult decisions in difficult times. I request that you move into phase 1 of reopening by allowing residents to return to the beach for exercise only. All other restrictions for parking and rentals should remain in place until we're able to assume that number of cases in a significant decrease. Testing, accurate data collection. I understand that enforcement may be difficult and will volunteer and assist any way possible. Thank you. Next up is Patty, I think it's Accra. I would like to make the following suggestions regarding Sunset Beach. If it is decided to open, I would definitely be in favor of limiting access. I highly recommend that the open beach access be one way, and one way coming off. Any walkways should have a sign posted clearly, no loitering, no nothing but for exercise. Any walkway that is open should not have a seating area on it that only encourages people to sit. I do not believe chairs, towels, umbrellas, and etc. should be allowed at this time. Thank you. Next is a Henry Brandt, Sunset Beach Island. It is quite clear that the basis of faulty epidemic models, incompetent and inconsistent data, and media has failed. The town has overreacted to the virus, and through the emergency declaration, unnecessary to close the beach. The restrictions were not enacted when all these other diseases were going on. The town restriction denies residents the right to evaluate the risks, take responsibilities for their action, and decide a suitable in the face of a virus outbreak. Initially closing off streets but allowing private parking had no scientific basic in controlling the virus spread. The limiting beach access to only 2 locations actually increased by funneling people through the same thing. The restrictions are inconsistent. The beach is closed, but the golf course isn't. Parking is forbidden on the island, but at the boat ramp and golf courses. Fishing from the town pier by the boat ramp is allowed, while fishing from the beach is not. Activities here are inherently safe and able to easily maintain social distancing. Thank you. Next is Dana Diaz. I hope you're on your way to consider opening the beach strand to beachgoers at Sunset Beach soon. I think it is very important to be outside and families to be together. During this unprecedented time, every choice has a consequence. The virus is not going away anytime soon, and it could be with us for several months or years. We cannot operate on a closure basis. It is not a suitable, sustainable solution. Sunset Beach is a wonderful family beach, not a hot party area. Most families are respectful, and the beach patrol does a wonderful job keeping the cabanas 10 foot apart during the summer season and patrol quite frequently. I feel more safe at the beach than I do in other areas of high risk like crowded shopping centers or grocery stores where the virus exposure is considered more obvious. People should be allowed to access with their families at the beach at any time and enjoy the outdoors. If there are people at higher risk, they should already be taking considerations, and if they are not, that is their own liability and risk. I plan on coming over the end of May, not as a renter, but as an extended family member, to enjoy all Sunset Beach and Brunswick County has to offer. Thank you. Next up is Thomas Vincent, 422 36th Street. I fully support the recommendation that the town continue its state of emergency until May 15th or longer. While none of us are enjoying the new norm, I think it's imperative that we continue the many controls initiated by the state, the county, and the town of Sunset Beach to ensure our continued well-being. As we watch daily White House briefings and other newscasts, discussion is being turned from containment to reopening the economy. As a result, we are seeing demonstrations taking place, some in North Carolina demanding that restrictions be lifted. All of this happening in spite of the fact that the confirmed cases nationwide have increased by almost 50% in the last week. In our neighborhood, we have seen the beginning of an outbreak from many non-resident property owners who do not believe that stay-at-home orders pertains to them. They travel between the residents and summer homes here as if nothing is happening. As the population becomes less tolerant of restrictions, I would expect to see an even higher level of non-compliance. For our town, that would translate into more non-resident property owners, friends, and family coming here from different parts of North Carolina and other states. Thank you. And that is all of them that were sent in to Lisa through the town email. We have one more, but it is not on an agenda item, so it'll be read at the end. All right. Moving on to our department reports.
Yes, sir. We're just asking that they be accepted as read or as written. I just included them since we did not have our April 6th meeting.
Okay. All right, with that being said, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Jen?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Borman?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
so moved. Let's go down. All right. Next up will be our old business section. First thing on the agenda is the remote meeting policy. And Town Administrator Marziano, you have the floor.
Thank you. This was drafted at the request of our last meeting, got this done. And Grady, we sent it to Attorney Richardson, and Grady reviewed everything and sent us back a clean and edited version. And that's what you've got in your packet today. I know it's sort of a moot point since we're kind of doing it right now. But this, right now, this being a state of emergency, this is what we have to do. This remote policy would help us moving forward should something like this ever be needed again. So what you've got in here presented just basically a definition for what you're doing for remote participation, how we'll establish the connections. If basically if you can't be heard, you can't participate, and then just the guidelines for what qualifies as what we need to do, when we need to do it, and how we do it.
Okay. That being said, do I have a motion to accept it?
How about a discussion?
We'll do it in the middle. won't we?
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, you can either take the motion to accept it and then do a discussion, but since this is so new to everybody, it's not a problem to do a discussion first.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and do discussion first.
Because that way, if there's any amendments.
Perfect. Councilman Corbett, would you like to go ahead?
I think the policy overall is good.
You get a phone call?
Yeah, but I can't, I mean, I'm not gonna say
Okay.
it.
My concern is a remote participation. I'm very comfortable with this format when we are in a state of emergency. Other than that, the council has operated for years without any other special exceptions that permitted people to attend remotely. And other than the state of emergency, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with the change in the participation rules beyond the state of emergency.
So, just for everybody understanding online and everything, you're talking 1A, B, C?
Yes, I think 1D is good. 1A is personal illness. We would really need to discuss and decide what determines when a person, if we had kept that in, on what basis we would do that. Again, we haven't done so in the past. Employment defined as a member having a mandatory prior commitment. I mean, we know when our meetings are, they're scheduled in advance. One would hope that that could be coordinated. Family emergency, those things happen. In most cases, if one of us has to depart for a family emergency, the last thing on their mind is going to be preparing for and participating in a council meeting. Other reasons as approved by the council. I mean, if the council decides on a case-by-case basis to permit remote participation, then that would be a council discussion at the time when that's an issue. I mean, and so that's the basis. I'm looking for. I think state of emergency is a good reason to do remote participation. I'm not sure if the other reasons, which have always been there, are something that we should put into the record, but that's just one opinion.
Councilman Aaron?
Well, these are certainly trying times, and I only would agree to this remote meeting while we are in a state of emergency. Otherwise, we just need to keep things the way they were.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have any discussion? Go ahead.
I'm fine with it as it is.
Okay. Councilman Phillips?
After listening to John, in my mind, he makes some very good points as far as employment and being employed. When you run for these positions, you tend to know what time constraints are required of you. So I would be supportive of removing A, B, and C as well.
Okay. Councilman Borman?
Yes, I'd agree with that as well, that the state of emergency is kind of the overriding reason for why we're doing this in the first place. And the other issues, they're more avoidable, I think, except for something like a family emergency. But as John said, I think that the council meeting shouldn't take priority over a family emergency. So I'd agree to the state of emergency and leave it at that.
Okay. With that being said, this would now say the Town of Sunset Beach remote participation policy and rules during state of emergency procedures. That's what would be on the floor now. That would be taking off the A, B, and C, which was the illness, the employment, and the family emergency things.
We would leave E though, right?
E would stay in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So with that being said, do I have a motion that that's the way we go with this?
Are there any
So
more
moved.
Any more discussions?
Any more discussion?
Any more discussions?
No.
Ms. Harris?
I have none.
Mr. Phillips?
No.
Mr. Borman?
No.
Okay. With that being said, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris?
Aye.
Councilman Phillips?
Aye.
Councilman Borman?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. All right, next up is our leaf and limb collection contract. Dustin Graham, you have the mic.
This is the leaf and limb collection contract the town advertised back in this past March for the leaf and limb collection service. We received 2 bids on March 27th. One was the construction waste removal for $95,760. The other one was Brush Bandit Hauling LLC, $107,800. The current contract we have now is with Brush Bandit. It comes due at the end of, expires at the end of June 30th. We would like to go into contract with construction waste removal for $95,760 for the coming fiscal year.
All right,
I have a question.
go ahead.
Do we know anything about the performance of the places of construction waste removal?
They take care of St. James also. They took over it for the past year. They've been doing it. Also.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Corbett, you have anything?
What was the value of the current contract?
About 117.
Okay, so Brush Bandit even dropped that 10,000?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I'm comfortable with construction waste removal.
Councilman Phillips?
Agreed.
Sir?
Agreed.
Okay. Councilman Borman?
Just one question, Dustin. What's the frequency of pickup?
The town's broke up in 2 zones. So it's the first Monday of the first zone is the first and third Monday of the month. Then the second zone is the second and fourth Monday of the month. The only time we don't pick up is when there's a 5th Monday.
So twice a month.
Yes, twice a month. There it gets picked up twice a month.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Harris?
I have no questions.
Okay. With that being said, do I have a motion?
I move we accept the staff recommendation and award the contract to construction waste removal for a price of $95,760 effective July 1, 2020.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris?
Aye.
Councilman Phillips?
Aye.
Councilman Borman?
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is our 2020 paving contract award. Dustin Graham, it's your presentation, sir.
The town advertised back in March for the 2020 paving contract. We received 2 bids on March 25th, one from Highland Paving for $193,500. The other one was Barnhill Construction for $168,820. The roads that's proposed being paved is Rice Mill. That is from Clubhouse to Cotton Mill that the town owns. Cotton Mill is a court, is a cul-de-sac that's off of Rice Mill, and Forest Creek that is off of Rice Mill, and the Colony down in Oyster Bay is proposed.
Okay. We'll start.
We recommend that we go with Barnhill Construction for $168,820.
And the other one was Highland at 193.5.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. We're going to open it for discussion. Councilwoman Harris, would you like to begin this one? Do you have any questions, comments?
Yes. Is this absolutely necessary at this point in time?
Well, the roads is in pretty good, what do you say, bad shape. There's alligatored up. Plus, part of it's gonna come out of Powell bill. It's going,
I was gonna tell you that there's $106,000 left in Powell bill, so the majority of this will be covered by Powell bill, will not come out of general fund. We've already collected those funds.
And for those who can't hear, Ms. Drott, Finance Director, pointed out that this will be mostly covered by the Powell bill funds. There's
Yeah.
106,000 currently in that fund. It would not be as impactful as one would think just looking at this total price.
And could we use the Powell bill on anything else? Or does it have to be used on our roads?
It gets used on our roads solely.
yes.
Okay. So we might as well do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilman Phillips, do you have anything you'd like to ask, add, question?
Whoops, got muted.
Quick question, would that be out of 1920 budget or 2021?
This year's.
It's this year's current budget,
This year's
2020.
current budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Borman?
Yes, a question about the Powell bill. That comes from the state.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
So if the state decides at some point that they're going to reduce that support, would the town be liable for this
The revenues have already,
contract?
the Powell bill revenues for this year have already come in.
Yeah, we've already collected that.
So we have the money on hand.
Yeah, we've already
Okay.
collected that, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Nern, do you have anything you'd like to add or comment or question?
I have a motion if everyone else is done.
I just had a quick question. The two of them, do we have past history with Barn Hill
Yes,
contracting?
we do.
Okay,
They-
they've done our
Yes.
paving before?
Yes, they have.
Okay, and we've been happy with them?
Yes.
Okay. And this has a new set of dates. Are they aware of the dates and can they meet those dates?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I had.
That being said,
Uh,
Nern?
I move that the council approve the paving bid from Barnhill Contracting with a bid price of $168,820, along with the updated project dates from April 28th, 2020 to June 26th, 2020.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris?
Aye.
Councilman Phillips?
Aye.
Councilman Borman?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Dustin. All right, next up is our COVID-19 state of emergency discussion. Councilman Phillips, the floor is open for discussion. Would you like to add, or what would you like to say, sir?
As we're all seeing, there's increasing pressures to open up beaches up and down the coast. One of the things that I've consistently heard is that people who have been on the beach prior to completely shutting it down say that they saw no violations of the social distancing and that we're all adults and we can all manage ourselves, which I very much believe in. However, one of the things that's quite often mentioned is, to basically open up the beach and then if there are gatherings that are in violation of social distancing, then to cite them. In my mind, that sounds like a good thing on paper. In reality, however, is by the time you get there to disperse those people, for lack of a better phrase, they've already cross-pollinated in my mind. And so sadly, it is the behavior of a few people that has the potential with this to have a significant detriment to our town as a whole. Many of us are watching the numbers on a daily basis. Somewhere roughly in North Carolina, 23 to 25% of the cases are those over 65. Yet they make up roughly 85% of the mortality rate in North Carolina. Considering the demographics of our town, I think that although other beach towns are opening up, other states are opening up for beach access, my initial thing is considering those things that I just mentioned, that it would be preemptive for us to open up our beaches earlier than we had previously spoken about.
Anything else, sir?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Borman, you have the floor.
Yeah, I have concerns as well. Looking at the data that we receive pretty much on a daily basis from the county as well as from the state, when you look at the amount of testing that's been done, it's less than 1% of our population. So in my mind, we really don't have a true appreciation for what kind of infection rate we actually have. If we do open up the beaches, my concern is that we would have a new influx of people coming to the beaches. And I know there's been a lot of comments about keep the parking closed, though I don't know if we could do that for the private parking areas. But certainly I'd expect to see, once the beaches are open, that there'd be a new influx of people that'd be coming to the beach. They'd be going to the stores. And I'm concerned that because we really don't know what the true infection rate is, that we'd be opening up ourselves to a big increase in the number of infections that we won't see for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Yes, some of the other communities, some of the other beaches have opened up, and I think we should look to see what happens as a result of those beaches in South Carolina and North Carolina opening up, and see if there is a big increase in rates of infection. I think we should right now err on the side of caution, and that we should take a wait and see and reassess at some point in time in the near future to see what we should do differently. But at the moment, I think we should stay where we are.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Moving on, Councilwoman Harris, you have anything?
Yes, I agree with Councilman Phillips and Councilman Borman. I think what we have in place right now is working well. Our Brunswick County statistics are continuing to increase, not by much, but still there's been almost 2 increases per day. It has not leveled off. So I think it's better to be safe than sorry, especially with the average age of our population. And I think opening the beaches up will bring in more people to use our grocery stores, pharmacies, etc., that are already stressed. So I think we should wait and see what happens at the beaches that are going to open up soon.
Anything else?
No.
Councilman Nern?
These are hard decisions to make when you consider everything. I appreciate all the emails, even the ones that call me a socialist. There's so many things to consider. Right now, we closed off all but 2 walkways, and that was violated probably every walkway, who knows how many times a day, and it wasn't enforceable. So then we closed the beaches, and that affects us too. Everything we add or have added, we have to think of a lot of things well, down the road and hopefully shortly down the road, our restaurants, our rental companies, having visitors here. It really hasn't, the state of emergency hasn't really stopped people from coming here. In talking to representatives of rental companies, people call and tell them, my friends are coming down there for 2 weeks, please provide a key. Here they come, not only from other parts of North Carolina where the infection rates are worse, but other parts of the country. I didn't think we had any choice but to close the beaches. And I don't know what people do when they come here. The beach isn't open, the restaurants aren't open, nothing is open. I want to see what the governor has to say on April 28th, is it?
29th.
29th, sorry. Before I make a final decision on this, I would definitely put the beach opening off until May 1st. If we do it then, and if things change, we can call for an emergency meeting and take care of that. Right now, I'm not prepared to open the beach back up. One last thing, when we do see what the governor says, we have to think about our rental companies. I would like to give them a date say towards the end of May so they can take care of their business. That's all.
Thank you. Councilman Court.
I'm pretty much in agreement with everything that has been said. Just, I would want to add in a little bit. We do not have to set any specific dates at this time. Our state of emergency proclamation with all the amendments say that they have a specific, that does not have a set date to open the beach or open up short-term rentals. Right now, as written, it says until we lift the state of emergency. I think that we should wait and find out what the governor does with his executive order on stay in place or shelter in place that is extended to April 29th, and then consider what our options are based on what the governor does in the overall state of affairs. I mean, we can open up the beach on very short notice. We can have a special meeting to discuss that on short notice. I'm concerned with setting a date until we hear what the governor says, setting a date for relaxing our restrictions on short-term rentals until we know what the governor does. And I'd also point out that according to our state ordinances and the executive order on the shelter in place now, it still leaves it to the prerogative of the locality to have more restrictive guidance based on the situation in the locality. So we have the flexibility to find out what the governor is going to do and then see what we think is appropriate for the beach and what's appropriate for short-term rentals. One comment on opening the beach. Whenever we open the beach, right now on the island we have permanent residents who are there. We have non-resident owners who, for for the most part, who have been there since the beginning of this shelter in place. I would posit that if we release the beach restrictions, even though we are encouraging people to be responsible and shelter in place, and only come here on essential reasons to come here, that we would have more non-resident owners who would show up. We would have more relatives who show up. We would have more friends who show up, increasing the burden on the community and increasing the danger of contacting COVID-19, since many of these people would be coming from areas outside of our relatively so far safe and secluded Sunset Beach community. I'm concerned that the statistics in Brunswick County are woefully inadequate. As Councilman Borman said, only about 1% of our population is tested. The statistics that get reported clearly come out and say Brunswick County has X number of cases and X number of deaths. And then you have to read down into the fine print and say there's also a number of non-resident cases and non-resident deaths that are taking place. If you look at the Star News Obit page today, you see that there were two deaths in the county that I'm not sure if they've really been reported, but they are obits from Thursday and Saturday in our county. So the statistics are flaky too. I think it's too early to do this. We should be cautious, as has been advised, and in the process of doing this, we should ask our police department and fire department to try to be even more proactive in patrolling the beach, because contrary to what we think is the effectiveness of the patrolling, there are violations taking place on a daily basis of people going out, walking the beach, surfing, swimming, and so I'm very concerned about all of that. So I say wait till the governor tells us what he's going to do about the April 29th date, and then we can consider if we need to take any other actions at that time.
Is that all, sir?
That's enough.
All right, with that being said, it's pretty unanimous here that the council want to stay with what we got right now in the state of Audit. It does not have a date on it, so it can be lifted as our governor continues to give us what's going on. With that being said, this was just a discussion, so I don't think we have to have a motion in a second. So as of now, the order will remain as stands, and as things change, we can come back in. I can call a special meeting or an emergency meeting, and we can change it as needed.
Do y'all want to go ahead and, since the governor should, his order runs out on the 29th, y'all want to have a 30th meeting, a first meeting already? Because we can go ahead and advertise it.
We have that one, the 4th.
That's right. We can wait till May 4th as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, we can always cause an emergency. If it's completely necessary, we'll call it.
Just checking to see if you want to go ahead and do something.
Yes, sir. Thank you. With that being said, we'll stay with that. Is that okay with everybody?
Okay with me.
Councilwoman Harris, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on. New business.
Well, I have something for the state of emergency.
Okay. Hold on, we have a state of emergency thing from Miss Tara. Tara Drop, our finance director. Go ahead, ma'am.
So I've had 2 requests from citizens in the town that relate to this situation. One of them is from the Sunset Inn. They are asking for an extension on paying their accommodation tax to us. The amount is approximately $900. My response to this and my recommendation is that we don't extend it. But, I mean, it's absolutely up to you. The way that accommodation tax works is that it's a pass-through. So they collect it from the customers, and it passes through to the town.
This was money they collected prior to us issuing the state of emergency?
Correct. It was the first half of March, so it's first half of March accommodation tax that they have collected. I can't make a decision on tax at all, because it has to be something from the council. The one thing that I will say is if you do decide to do an extension, it has got to be paid before the end of June. Otherwise, it's outside of our fiscal year. So
With that being said, I guess we'll bring it to the council for discussion. Would you consider an extension, or do you want to stick with what we have? Councilman Phillips, you're up first.
One question, if we were to give an extension through, as you said, to the end of June, and it's not paid at that point, what are the ramifications of that?
there's penalties and fees associated with it.
Okay. That's the question I have right now.
Okay. Councilman Borman?
So this is money that they've already collected from people that have stayed there.
Correct. In March, the first half of March.
Right. So if they were to get an extension, they really can't do anything with that money. Legally, they're not allowed to divert it into other expenses, are they?
I'm not sure about the legality in that aspect.
It's a tax that should be paid within a time frame. So I don't know if the thought of them using it for anything else probably would come up, since it's due 30 days anyway after they collect it.
I think since they've already collected it, that they should pay it, I think.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything to add? Any comments? Questions?
I agree. If it's already collected, if they've already paid it, it should be paid. If it's already collected, it should be paid.
Councilman Nern, do you have anything to add?
I have one question, Tara. You said something, if it's collected after June 30th, it would be in the next fiscal year?
So I was just saying that if there was an extension given, this is from March. So in order to, like, for record keeping and for auditing purposes, you would want to keep it in this fiscal year. So it would be, if you went past June 30th, that's in our next fiscal year. And so it's a lot less clean as far as, collecting and fees and penalties. There's a lot more to it if you went past that point.
And technically, the penalties and fees would apply after April 30th for March?
April 25th, I believe it is.
So basically, you'd be extending the deadline and waiving penalties until a certain date.
Because I have to pay the county.
Yeah.
There's I agree. They already have the money. They should pay it, and they're not really any different from any other business in the town that are mostly out of business for now. So I don't know how they're going to go about paying their taxes and whatever else. So I would say no extension.
Councilman Corbett?
I agree that since they've already collected those taxes and rendered the services, they should go ahead and pay it on time.
All right, with that being said, are you looking for a motion whether either way or just a?
Well, at that
just an
point,
answer,
if you're
or-
not going to do an extension, we don't need anything. We just
Okay.
enforce the regular rules.
Okay.
Ms. Drop does have another
There's,
request,
yeah.
though.
So the
Another
other,
question?
So we will be enforcing that, correct?
yeah, I'll email them and
Okay.
let them know that.
All right, so
We're
the
not-
public can know.
One other question, Tara. So they also collect the state tax as well. Did they get an extension from the state?
I haven't seen anything where there's been any extensions from the state. This was the only request I had, and I've been on the School of Government webinars and the LGC webinars, and I haven't seen anything about this at all.
Yeah, I think they should. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the other request came in beginning on March 18th. And so I have an email in writing of a request that is for $108.
I'm sorry, how much?
$108. It was a rental, a short-term rental that was allowed to be canceled. But they had remitted their accommodations tax before the transaction was completed. So they remitted taxes, the accommodation tax, before the person ever actually came and rented the property. So the renter prepaid, the property owner remitted their accommodations tax, and then sometime after that, they allowed them to cancel due to the pandemic beginning. We were not in a state of emergency. We hadn't stopped short-term rentals yet, or anything like that. My first response to this was that you should not remit your taxes until the transaction is final. So the person, you've collected the money, they've stayed at the property, like the whole thing is completed. Then you remit your taxes for that. That's not what took place here. And this again is the only request of this nature that I've received. So my response again was that it has to do with taxes. I can't do anything about a refund. There is another piece to this, which is I have already remitted our 1% to the county, which for this person or this rental was $18. So that would have to be removed from, if council decided to give this person a refund, it would have to be removed from that. So it's 1% off of the original cost. So the total that we would have remaining in Sunset Beach in accommodations tax would be $90. I've never heard of this either. I don't think that I can't find anywhere that there's any precedent for a refund of accommodation tax. I've looked through blog posts from the local government commission. I've looked through the school of government. I don't have any direction on to whether this is allowed or disallowed.
I would like to ask our town administrator, what's your experience on something like this?
Pretty much the same as Ms. Drops. This has not happened the entire time I've been here. But as with any other tax, I mean, it's going to have to take a governmental action of the council in order to release a tax, is basically what it'd be doing. As Ms. Drop said, we couldn't release the full amount because we don't have the full amount. We paid our due to the county. I don't know if it's any similar to a sales tax when you do a return to, a store and they get to remit your sales tax, but then they file back to the state to get their money back. You know what I'm saying? We don't have a process to handle this type of thing because it's really out of sequence.
There would have to be some major, I would think there would have to be some kind of policy, because you have to have proof of how everything went through and when it was rented, when it was allowed to be canceled, when the payments actually came in. I mean, I would think you would need a lot of documentation if this was allowed.
Couple
Go ahead, Councilman.
questions. The people did not stay here, okay? And did they voluntarily cancel, or was it due to the state of emergency?
This was before the state of emergency. This was on March 18th. We didn't begin the state of emergency until the 23rd.
23rd.
Well, they paid the tax in advance. I think we should give them back the town part and tell them that as far as the state part, they would have to go to the state. It seems only fair.
Well, the county. Yeah.
Oh, the county, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I meant county.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything to add? Questions, comments, suggestions?
I'm ambivalent on this. I want to hear a little more discussion.
Councilman Phillips, do you have any comments, suggestions, questions?
So my question is, I would assume that it's fairly well known what the procedure is for remitting these payments as far as the order of things from start to finish. Am I correct in that, Mr. Opp?
I believe so, especially since this is the only request I've had, or the only inquiry I've had as well.
Okay. So the way I look at this is it was an error by whoever submitted the taxes on the timing of it. That they, in an effort probably to try to be ahead of the curve or whatever, it didn't follow the proper order, and therefore, in my mind, the town shouldn't be liable for that decision and that procedural error. That's my viewpoint.
Councilman Borman?
So were the rest of the fees returned to the people that were supposed to come? The rent and the fees, whatever they might be, cleaning fees and the things of that nature, were they all returned to the renters?
She said that the total of it was 1,800, which would be, the 6% would be 108.
Right.
If she's returned, I believe that she would be returning everything except for what she paid to the town. That would be.
But we don't know.
Yeah, I don't have that.
We don't have anything other than an email and a phone call stating that she returned their money.
So if she didn't make any money from it, which she should confirm that that they returned everything, and I assume that this is a private rental, that it's not like something from.
Correct. It's a single person property owner.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they didn't make any money, I think it'd be okay to return the tax that they mistakenly paid up front, which they shouldn't have done, as you said. But if they didn't make any money, I don't think they made a mistake. Yes. I don't know that we should punish them for it, but we should have a document, some form of an affidavit saying what happened, that they returned all the money, and therefore the sales and use tax really wasn't due. So I think it would be okay to return just the town's portion.
I think, if I remember the email thread that was there, that the owner did not return the accommodation tax to the renter. The owner paid the tax, and when they did the refund, it sounded to me like in the email, they refunded everything except the accommodation tax. So if we do a refund, and we're talking about only being able to control $90, then theoretically it would go back to the owner, who would then give it to the renter, although we have no control over that process.
Right.
Okay, just understanding the steps.
Yeah.
The question I have is, do we move ourselves, since we really don't know what's happened with everybody else? Are we establishing a precedent that could be very expensive with other renters who may or may not have paid accommodation taxes or whatever, and we as a town get caught in the middle as they work through their various refunds and issues with the renters?
That's why my thought is, if you do decide to do this, there needs to be something very specific, like what needs to be provided and how it needs to be provided, almost an entire policy. Just because that's also my fear, is that you start this and it's a tax and it's like going to be a snowball effect. Even though it shouldn't be that you submit that before the transaction has been completed.
Question.
Another question.
This is the only one we've heard of.
Yeah.
The money that's coming in from March, have we been seeing anything yet?
I have seen some. It hasn't been a lot, but there has been some coming in. I've gotten a lot of zeros of the forms coming in.
My recommendation is if you do proceed with some way of authorizing the refund of $90, or the release of $90 worth of tax, it'd be specific only to the March payment, or it came in March, right? We would have gotten this in February to pay or from February to pay March for us to
Yeah.
already paid the county.
I think
right?
it's for March. Yeah.
Okay. It needs to be specific to a time frame, and we need to see some canceled checks from where they returned the money, and their canceled contract where it shows how much money was supposed to have been. I mean, we need to see evidence for us to release a tax. I mean, it's no different than, again, I call it back to sales tax. I've got to show a receipt for proof of purchase, or they ain't touching me. So I think we need to see the documentation if this is something we're going to do. I know that we should. I mean, it's money they didn't earn, so therefore they shouldn't have paid a tax. That's fine, but we still need to see the proof that everything's up and up.
That would have been my question. Was are we setting a bad precedent? I have to give that property owner credit, because so many that rent on their own do not pay the occupancy tax, which gives them an unfair advantage with the rental companies or anybody else renting on their own. So I have to give that property a lot of credit for sending it in early. But we should take all the precautions that Hiram mentioned.
With that being said, would we want to put this maybe on our next meeting, which would be the 4th, which will give them approximately 2 weeks to get you some more information and see if it stands out and would be worth that instead of trying to make a decision off no information?
So you're saying
You could reach
get the
out to
proof
them and
before
get proof, and then we
making a
could work off
decision?
of it from there, and we could mention that at our next meeting. You talk in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely can reach out to her and tell her that.
And we can redact names and stuff so they don't
Yeah.
have to show up
Right.
in the
That's
agenda
fine.
packet.
Councilman Nern, you okay with that?
I'm fine.
Councilman Corbett?
Yeah, I would be comfortable with getting all the proof in before we, I mean, actually what we're doing is sending a message that if you give us all the proof, then we'll give you your $90 back. And I'm comfortable doing that if the documentation is there in such a way that ensures that $90 goes to the renter ultimately.
Right.
Councilwoman Harris?
I'm fine with that.
Councilman Phillips?
Disagree with that.
Councilman Borman?
Yeah, it's okay with me.
Okay. All right, so we'll look to that. We'll do that as our directives. We can put a little notation on there about that. Thank you.
I have one more state of emergency question.
Okay.
May special events. We've pretty much canceled April's. Don't know what to do with May's yet. But we've got maybe 2 markets. We've got 2 weddings. Is it 2 weddings or 1 wedding?
2 weddings and the run.
And the run that got rescheduled from March to May.
Is either one of them before the 4th, any of that?
None of it's before the 4th, I don't believe, except for one of the markets was intended to start on the 4th.
I've already got the council on that. The markets should have already started.
Yeah, they'd want to start that week. My recommendation is, regardless of what we do decide, when's the first event besides the markets?
Yeah, I've got a wedding, I think the 4th, and it's more than 20 people. One wedding is like a huge wedding in the middle of and then the other wedding is like 20 or more people.
Without thinking, I mean, from what I've been understanding is they're going to still keep the social distancing measures in place, maybe even the 10 requirement. So I've got no problem letting those people know they need to probably find another venue. But my recommendation is so we can let these people know what to do, to go ahead and at least cancel through the 15th, regardless of what we decide on the 4th. Just go ahead and not have anything in the park yet until the 15th as an earliest date, just as a soft start date for right now, so they can go ahead and make their plans whether they want to shift off or not.
Councilman Phillips, do you have anything on that?
I wasn't able to hear when the first events plan.
Well, the markets are supposed to be already starting, so the first week in May would have already had 2 markets.
Right. And events other than the markets.
First wedding,
First of the month and then in the middle of the month.
we got one at the first of the month and one in the middle of the month. First of the month, I'm already ready to tell them to find another venue.
Okay. I'd be willing to push until the 15th until we see, again, what the governor is going to put out for us to go from there. And then we can kind of hopefully get a little bit more data as well.
And no money's been collected except for the application fees.
Yeah.
They haven't taken
Oh, go ahead.
Councilman Harris, I don't know what you're doing, but you're making a bad squeak on our thing if you'll.
Oh, I am?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear everything you're doing. I don't know if you're raking the yard or what.
No, I'm not.
Would you,
Sorry.
since I have you on the phone now, do you have any comments to add to this?
No, I do not.
Okay, Councilman Borman?
The weddings are in the park, the park, Hiram?
Yes, we're only talking about special events in the park.
Okay. The date that you suggested of the 15th, that's a soft date. That's a tentative date. It's not a firm date, yeah?
Right, yeah, just doing a soft date right now so that I can give people an answer today that anything
Okay,
before
yeah.
the 15th cannot happen, and by the 4th, we should know if anything's going to happen after the 15th.
Okay, Councilman
Okay,
Corbett,
fine with
you
me.
got anything?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Soft date 15th, cancel everything before the 15th, and on the 4th, we will know hopefully what the governor is going to do, and we will act accordingly on the 4th.
Councilman Nern, do you have anything?
Yeah, I like the soft date of the 15th and the wedding on the 4th. I'm so sorry.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on now. That's all you have, Ms. Terry? Do you have anything else from there? Okay. Next up will be our new business, and it is our audit contract for the 1920. Ms. Tara Drop, our finance director, you have the floor.
So this is this would be our audit contract. I believe this is the final year that we would be with Preston Douglas before doing an RFP. So for the next budget year after this, we would do another RFP. It's usually between 3 to 5 years. So that would be our timeline. There's no change for this audit from last year as far as cost. And I've been happy with their service. So I just need a motion,
You looking for a
discussion,
motion?
whatever.
Councilman Harris, do you have anything to add or questions?
No.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Councilman Phillips?
No.
Councilman Borman?
Nothing for me.
Councilman Corbett?
No.
Councilman Nern?
No.
All right,
I
with
make
that
a
being
motion.
said, there's no discussion. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve we approve the $19,000 for FY 1920 audit services by Preston Douglas and Associates.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Representative Harris?
Aye.
Councilman Phillips?
Aye.
Councilman Borman?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Moving on to our next new business, we have the resolution authorizing sale of property. Again, it's our finance director, Ms. Tara. You have the floor.
So this is like a surplus authorization for, during the initial budget meetings, the fire department had presented the plan of selling, and in looking through rules and regulations and statutes, I found that we can't just sell that fire truck. So we have to surplus it through council and then put it out for bid, just as we would for anything else. But on this one, We know what the minimum value should be, so we have a minimum bid of $275,000 on this piece of equipment.
All right, do we have some discussion here? Go ahead.
To clarify, see if I remembered correctly, the idea was to sell this older ladder truck. Okay, and then with that purchase, with that, we can order and purchase a new Quint truck, which is a combination ladder and pump truck. And in the end, which could take a year or so to be delivered because it has to be manufactured to our specs. And during that period of time, our fire department has coordinated with mutual aid fire departments around to make sure that we have ladder truck coverage.
Yes, sir.
To cover us. Okay. And then when the Quint arrives, we'll probably turn around and sell the oldest truck that we have
Correct.
at that point in time. And we can operate efficiently with 4 trucks.
Correct.
With the enhanced capacity that we get from the Quint.
Correct.
Okay, all that right? Okay.
And the money from the sale and the capital money we put away in the fire budget this year and for proposed next year would go towards funding that purchase, but it's about, from the time they get the specs drafted up, get y'all to approve it, go out for RFP, select a company, then looking at 12 to 14 months of construction. So it's a 16 to 18-month project.
Okay.
Councilman Nern, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything to add?
No.
Councilman Phillips?
I'm good, thank you.
Councilman Borman?
Will the ordering of the new truck have impact on the 2021 budget?
It will, and that's an item that would come to y'all as either if it's after the first of the year as a budget amendment, or if it's before the first of the year, part of the planned budget process. But it's all through fire fees that will be collected regardless. So it only impact the fire department's budget, not the town's budget.
Okay.
And the sale of this old truck would go to that.
Yeah, the sale of this old truck would pretty much take care of close to a quarter of it, if not a little bit more.
Okay.
All right, with that being said, if there's no more discussion, do I have a motion to sell this truck, the 2008 E1 ladder truck? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris?
Aye.
Councilman Phillips?
Aye.
And Councilman Borman?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. All right, moving on next. On our new business, under new business, we have an ordinance to amend Chapter 72 parking regulations. And Town Administrator Marziano, you're up on this.
Thank you. Staff is proposing that the council review the following ordinance related to overnight parking in our public parking lots. The purpose of this is to assist in providing for the safety of personal property and prevent vagrancy that we have experienced over the last few years. This is an addition to Chapter 72. It'd be 72.27, no overnight parking in town-owned parking lots. The overnight would be defined as midnight, 12 a.m. and to 6 a.m. This is, from my research, pretty standard hours for overnight. You can't just call it overnight, though. You need to have defined terms. And I'll put in here that it's including but not limited to the parking lots located at the town park, the beach gazebo, and the parking along Sunset Boulevard South. It would also stand to reason that the park, Sunset Boulevard North area, our town hall, anything that's controlled by the town would be regulated by this ordinance. That there should be nobody staying overnight in our slots. And this does exempt, our personnel.
Okay. Councilman Nern, do you have anything to add?
No, it sounds like a good idea to me.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything?
No, it's good. That's good.
Councilman?
I'm fine with this.
Okay. Councilman Corbett?
I'm fine with this.
Councilman Phillips?
I'm good with it.
Councilman Borman?
Good for me.
Okay, with that being said, do I have a motion that we change this ordinance to 72 parking regulation? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Nern?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
And Mr. Borman?
Aye.
Thank you.
We'll get signs made up as soon as possible.
All right, moving on to our next, an ordinance to amend Chapter 93, Health and Sanitation Nuisances. Again, it'll be our town administrator, Mr. Marziano.
Yes, this is, the last few years, we've had an issue after major storms with our collection. The time it takes is compounded largely by the way people just throw the debris out there. Even they'll often hire contractors that'll just throw it out there and pile it up there. So basically what I've done here is copied the regulations for how we do yard debris and applied it to storm debris with a few modifications, but people would be responsible for still bundling it properly, stacking it properly, or putting it in cans so that we could come by and collect it a lot easier than just leaf and limb pickup last week for Public Works. Took several days and it was bundled properly. But this would cut down on 30 days for what should take, 2 weeks, in my opinion, hopefully. But it's also kind of hammering home that because we didn't have it documented before, that if a contractor does come and clean your yard for you after a storm, they need to haul it off. So, I'm just asking if y'all to review this and hopefully adopt it, but it's basically the same rules we use for weekly yard debris.
Yes, sir. Councilman.
I've got one big concern with that, and several minor ones probably. The big one is if we have a hurricane, okay, we're going to have hunks of trees and stuff like that come down, and it's very difficult for a citizen to do much more than drag the large limbs out. To take it and knock it down into 4-foot stretches is asking an awful lot. Don't we usually get FEMA assistance funding for part of that removal?
Yeah, the money wise, yes. But for instance, how long did it take after Florence? Just from the tornado, not even the hurricane, it was 20 days?
Okay. I mean, and so with the trees and the debris that came down, we're expecting in a special situation like that, the citizen to be able to take and knock the tree down into 4-foot lengths?
Well, yeah. But there's also for us the concern of we've gotten lucky. There's been a storm a season. If another storm had come through while we were trying to do leaf and limb pickup, it would have been disastrous with all those things just stacked at the street, just flying all over the place. It's a matter of what's best for time. I mean, personally, I would prefer to say that we're not responsible to pick up leaf and limb storm debris, and they need to have a contractor pull it off. This was my compromise on that part. But if there's anything in here y'all want to change, that's fine. Like I said, the primary thing of this was also to make sure that anybody using a contractor, the contractor hauls it off.
Yeah, but that doesn't even happen now.
Yeah, I know.
But that's in our ordinance now, isn't it?
For yard debris.
Yeah.
Not for storm debris.
Yeah, but I mean, with yard debris, we're not even able to, or not even able to get all the citizens to cooperate.
Yeah, but we are driving around seeing the people taking care of this at the time that they're doing it after a storm.
Yeah.
So we're able to sit there and take note of that specifically then. But I mean, if y'all don't want to discuss it further today, I mean, this is just, we're going to have a bad season from all
Councilman
predictions.
Nern, do you have something to add to this?
The contractors say would give me a price, and I'd say, well, how much if you don't have to haul the stuff away? And then it lowers my price. And so they stack it in front of my house. I wouldn't do that, but I saw so much of that during the last couple storms that I don't know how we police that. I want to make sure we kept an eye on what the contractors were doing, make sure they follow our rules. You know, it was always a couple days after a storm that we put out a notice that you won't have to bundle. I don't have a problem with having people bundle. Just what the circumstances calls for at the time, and especially if FEMA is paying us back for it.
All you have, sir?
That's it.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything to add? Any questions, any suggestions, comments?
I don't have anything really to add. I do worry a little bit about the severity of a particular storm. Some storms are really, really damaging, and I worry about the time frame for a very, very significant hurricane. But other than that, I have no problem.
Okay. Councilman Phillips, do you have anything to add or questions, comments?
I share some of the concerns of Mr. Corbett. If you have a large tree to come down and you're trying to chop it up into either a 4-foot length or a 50-pound block, a fairly large tree, I imagine, make a whole lot of 50-pound blocks to get out there for people to put out. So I can see the benefit from the town and getting people back to what they're doing. My perspective right now is I might have to think on this some more at this time.
Okay. Councilman Borman.
Just as Mr. Phillips and Mr. Corbett has said, if you have a hurricane come through, to expect people to chop up trees or palm trees, including roots, is not reasonable. And I think there needs to be exceptions made. I don't have a problem with things that can be bundled, that they get bundled, but to say that everything has to be bundled with no exceptions is not reasonable.
Okay, you need something else, Mr. Corbett? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's also an aspect of this, if we're doing it, is enforcement. So a big tree comes down, people kind of chop it up into hunks what they can. You know, what do we do about going about, say, get the rest of that tree that's down off the property, or get that debris that has been in the storm off your property? One of the things that has worked in the past that has helped is get it all out to the curb, and then we'll kind of get it picked up. But I mean, we have people putting stuff out that's not properly bundled, and it'll stay there for weeks or months. And so, you know, what authority do we have as enforcement to make sure that if there is a storm, they get the debris cleaned up in a timely manner? Because if this, telling them to cut it into 4-foot lengths, if that discourages people from doing anything, then what power do we have to enforce or to get the debris all removed in a timely fashion? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's...
I'm not even sure we have an ordinance that requires them to remove it from their property. This is basically if they're having us remove it.
Okay.
I mean, we can
we've
take out...
We've got people now putting stuff out in the, off of their property on the edge of the road. Yeah, and it just stays there and stays there and stays there if it's not properly done. And if it's not properly done, we don't pick it up, and the property owners may or may not at some point in time doing it. Yeah, so my question is, how do we enforcement? How do we make sure that it works? And is it a reasonable policy in an emergency? I'm just not sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, 17 years ago when we moved here full time, it was easy for me to clean up the yard after a hurricane. So here we are 17 years later, and it's not so easy. You know, I'd like to think on this a little more myself.
Okay, with that being said, do we want to move this to a later time? Maybe look when we get to our directives to check up on it again. That'll give us a few weeks.
And that's fine. The question I've got for the council is, are y'all going to discuss it, like item by item, or do you want me to just redraft, scrap, what? Because, you know, if we come back and have the same questions.
We get no further than we are now.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Do you have a comment?
We've got our town expert. You got any views on that? On anything concerns have been raised?
Microphone if you do.
Time-wise, it would help us out. It would speed it up by picking up. Because right now, what happens is they just take it and they just throw it out there, crossways, anyway, and then we have to fight it to get it apart, take the backhoe. It's a lot more time-consuming. Just like we had a contractor this past hurricane put out hunks of big old trees out there by the road. It took us 2 days just to clean that one property up and haul off all this stuff off that one property. We spent 2 days. So,
and that was questionable whether it was actually storm debris or it was clearing that took place.
Yeah.
In conjunction with.
And it was a contractor was a contractor that put it out there.
Well, we need enforcement, some type of enforcement for contractors to do that. I don't know. Do we have anything in place?
No.
No, not at this time. Not on contractors. Just yard waste.
Yeah, this would carry a civil penalty with it. No.
Well,
I mean, if one of our inspectors or one of our police officers or one of our DPW workers is driving around anywhere in the town and sees a pile of stuff out in front of a house that's not properly tied up, a note should be made and the start of an enforcement letter, should begin right there.
Yeah, if something's notified to me or comes into Cindy, I'll go out and check it. And if it's not, we start a letter right then, sending it to them about the leaf and them. They need to tie it up, bundle it with the regulations and what they need to do to get it done.
Okay.
All right.
So could we require that the contractors take the debris that they've created away?
Yes.
Yes.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
No, I don't have any problem with that either.
Because we run into where the homeowners had them to take down extra trees and put out there by the road for us to clean up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you could amend it so that things that can be bundled are bundled, but like we said in the beginning, to have big hunks of a tree that has come down due to a storm be bundled out, that's not possible to do, I don't think.
Well, probably the reality is that if it is a big hunk of stuff like that, they're going to need the people are going to need a contractor to help cut it up and remove it. And if a contractor comes out and removes it, he has to take it away.
Yeah, that's fine, but I can tell you myself that I have a chainsaw, and when something big has come down, I've cut it up with a chainsaw myself.
Yeah, but if you're able to, with the chainsaw, cut it up, then you can move it out in the street because you've cut it up into a bundle that you could, get it down to where it could be removed.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that, but to say it needs to be tied up a big tree root or something like that.
No, we wouldn't say tree roots. No. If not like it's like limbs.
Yeah, this is just calling for limbs.
Things that can,
if you have logs, you don't have to tie them into bundles if they're logs.
Yeah.
Things that can be bundled should be bundled, and if it's taken down by a contractor, the contractor should haul it away.
I'd be comfortable with with that.
Mr. Phillips?
I agree with that as well.
Okay. Mr.
Yeah,
Aaron?
I'm good with that.
Ms. Harris?
Yes,
Okay. You agree with that?
yes.
Okay, okay.
So I think all the, we are enhancing is here, Libby. Must be removed. The contractor's in this also.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, okay.
Yeah, the last one, H,
Yeah.
handles that. Debris determined left by the
Yeah.
professional landscaper will be
Yeah.
collected. All right, with that
Well, I'd
being-
like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this, this amended ordinance as stated, 9306. And just do a better job of enforcing, getting letters out quick.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Phillips?
Aye.
Councilman Borman?
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, next up.
Just wanted to watch you dance.
Next up is be our request to take over streetlights, and our town administrator, Mr. Marziano. This one's on you again, sir.
Thank you. We've received a request from the Sea-Trail Masters Association that the town assume control and responsibility for a number of streetlights, 24 to be exact, along some of the roads we accepted back in October 2018. The letter's attached. Mr. Graham can speak to the process of how the lights were upgraded and everything like that. So,
Yeah, the Master Association is, like I said, the request of the town to take over the lights that are on the town streets. They have upgraded them to LEDs and put up new poles in the place of them also. So all the upgrades has been completed with these streetlights to bring them up to what we have now.
and you drove by and checked
And
all,
I've
yeah.
drove by and checked them. And
Each one's been
yeah, each one has been changed.
They the anticipated cost is about $9,500 to the town in addition to our current utility bill. I will take note that that is actually cheaper than the lights currently cost after they've switched them to LEDs. That would have been 12,000 give or take.
Yeah.
So there's still savings there. It's not uncommon for us to do this. In the past, we've taken over several streetlights, especially on roads that we've assumed control over. The same process going forward. You know, they paid for the upgrades up front, and then we take over the lights after that. So there's no upfront cost for us in repair and maintenance or bringing them up to our specs.
Councilman Earn, do you have anything?
I don't have any problem with this at all.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything?
Nothing.
Councilman Phillips?
Just a quick question. You said we started taking these streets over in 2018 inside of Sea Trail. Can somebody please give me a little background information on that, why we started taking over streets in that neighborhood?
Essentially, it's not just taking over those streets at that time. That was the last time we've taken over streets in Sea Trail. We'd previously done it before. But when some private roads, they'll want to dedicate them to the town. We do require them to bring those roads up to our specifications, which often will either require whole segments of road being repaved, maybe even milled. But the whole road gets repaired so that we don't have to end up paving it again for 7 to 10 years, hopefully. But it's a process that we're allowed, not just us as this town, but all municipalities allowed to take over private roads. This was just the last batch that we've done in Sea Trail. I can't remember, it was like 7 roads. Seven roads. In 2018 that we worked with them for about a year and a half on before we got them taken over. So, and even then they do all that work without even a guarantee that we'll take them over. All that work has to be done prior to presenting the request. And it's not just in Sea Trail. These lights just happen to be in Sea Trail, and that just happens to be the last time we took over private roads.
And another question about these lights, are there more lights in Sea Trail that we would possibly take over, or is this
No.
the last batch, or where do we stand in that regard?
What I was told by the Master Association, this is the last batch. This is it.
Okay. That's all I have.
Councilman Borman, do you have anything?
No, nothing for me.
Councilman Corbett?
I'm good with this.
Okay. That being said, do I have a motion to take over our request to take over the streetlights, which is, you said was 24?
24.
24.
Yes.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris?
Aye.
Councilman Phillips? Councilman Borman?
Aye.
Thank you, Dustin. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, and our last thing in our new business is our disposition of directives for our May 4th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have anything that they need to go ahead and add to here?
We're adding the state of emergency conversation on the 4th.
Yep.
Will we need any additional budget meetings?
Well, we'll definitely be doing something with the budget on the 4th, whether it be advertising your public hearing as well as another meeting, but we'll definitely be adding the advertised public hearing on the 4th.
Okay.
For sometime in June.
And also that deal with Tara about the receipts.
Yep.
So that needs to be on that one too, correct?
Yep.
All right.
I don't have anything else.
Mr. Phillips, you have anything?
I do. As many of us in the community found out, we've had a new vessel move into the area
Yes, sir.
that I've been personally getting a lot of complaints about, and I've spoken to some of the council members individually, and I think we would probably behoove us to have a discussion about trying to set some limitations on certain types of vessels in our community. And I'd like to maybe put that discussion on the 4th as well.
Yes, sir.
And then if we have support from there to maybe move forward to bring it to Grady's attention to see if there's something we can do.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to put together an agenda item, fact sheet, help us
Sure.
help us get educated on this?
So what I've started to do is I've started to look at the codes from basically Texas to Delaware, and I pulled up any sort of codes that would be appropriate so that we could then review at that time.
Sounds good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Borman, you got anything else? Anything for this?
No, nothing for me.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything that needs to be added?
Nothing.
Okay. Councilman Brown, you're good. And Councilman Corbett, you said you
Nothing
were good.
else.
Go ahead, Town Administrator, you need something to say?
I was just going to say real quick before we go into public comments, let's not forget that we have a budget workshop after this meeting. So if we want to recess,
We'll take a
please.
recess, yeah.
We will.
All right, with that being done, we got our directives up, which brings us up to 6. Y'all have 6 total?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next up is our public comments at the end, and again, it's limited to 3 minutes per speaker. I have one that was sent in that I will read, and we're going to check to see if we have any in the public. Okay, we don't have anybody in the public. So I will read this one. It is Mr. Edwin James, and it just says, for many of us, the only way we can participate as taxpayers is through YouTube. I'm not talking about the current situation. I'm talking about ongoing less than satisfactory media experience that cries out for improvement. We need 2 cameras on tripods with operators. They can be students or volunteers, 1 camera for dais and 1 camera for the speaker, podium, and audience. Lens angles need to be wide enough to where we can see what's going on. We need a sound system with a correct angle or cone of omnidirectional pickup microphones. Congressional, state, county, and town hearings accomplish this all over the country. Most people simply put their hand over the mic if they need to speak in the aisle. We also need the gain volume pickup continuously monitored in real time, not only for the chamber audience, but also for the YouTube audience. The clerk has asked many questions during the council meeting. It's public information. The clerk needs to have a microphone turned on so that the questions and answers can be heard. Special arrangements need to be made for hearing impaired councilmen, probably a set of headphones. The camera needs to be turned on at least 5 minutes prior to the scheduled start so that those watching or waiting on YouTube are not left wondering if our connection is lost. Too many times we try and log on and cannot because the meeting is late starting. Then we often miss the opening because of the complete guess that it will start. 0 excuse for mic battery problems. It's disrespectful and should not happen. Why can't we use microphones on a flexible fitting attached at each place of dais like most of them do around the country? I have written this several times. I have experience from working in the theater. Go to my hometown council and county meetings and wrote a comprehensive paper on the request of former Mayor Weiss. Our current contractor does not know what he is doing. And that was from Mr. Ted James. And that's the only one we have. And I will say this to Mr. James, we have addressed the speakers. We've actually put in to have the little mics on, so hopefully that'll be getting better soon. Thank you. If he's got anything else, anybody have anything else?
Nope.
Councilman Harris, you have anything else?
No.
Councilman Phillips? Councilman Phillips? He's muted.
Muted. Sorry, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Horman?
Nothing more from me, thanks.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
All right, got a second?
Second.
We're gonna take about how long y'all wanna take? You wanna take a lunch or you wanna?
No, just 5 minutes will be fine. We're gonna budget.
About 5, 10 minutes,
5,
okay.
10 minutes.
We'll continue on our budget next. We adjourn this meeting. Thank you, stay safe.
Alright, I muted the cameras.
Tom's back, Jamie's back, everybody's back. Yep. Gonna call back in the budget meeting, back in order, and Ms. Tara, you have the floor, our financial director.
So in this budget packet, you have, this is not much space. I've added revenue projections and have pretty much brought the budget down to operating. Do you want me to kind of go through my projections? Like how do you want to proceed as council? You have the projections in front of you, and I can kind of just go through it. Does that work?
Mr. Phillips, have you had a chance to read through all the budget?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Borman, you've had a chance to look through all the, Councilwoman Harris,
Yes.
Councilman Nern, and Councilman Corbett?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll just kind of go through my my revenue projections.
Yes, ma'am.
So as far as property tax, we got our first scroll from the county, and with our current tax rate that we have at 98%, that's the proposed budget for the ad valorem for the current year. The prior year in penalties, I'm just kind of basing off of last year. That's never an exact number. It's just an estimated number. But they are coming in a little bit less. We have a really good collection rate, so prior year is never a significant revenue.
That's the FY 19-20 projected column?
I'm talking about the proposed budget.
Okay, then. 2649500.
Yep.
500. Okay.
You're doing a 98% collection rate for this
Okay.
That's what the proposed budget for 2021. We did at 98%.
Last year we did a 96.
We did 96.
Okay.
Our collection rate runs around 99%.
Right, but that's showing the discrepancy between the budgeted
It is.
1920 number at 2.5 with the budgeted 2.6. There's no actual increase in taxes. It's just we're thinking we're going to have an increase in collection.
Well, that and added additional properties.
True.
Excuse me 1 minute, Tara, before we go any further. I just want to mention that there was a letter sent in for us to read at the budget. We don't have a public comment, but each member has seen the letter and been able to read it. Each one of our members have, okay? Thank you.
Sorry.
And motor vehicle tax, I believe that initially it is going to be affected in our next fiscal year, but eventually everybody's got to register their vehicles. So that collection rate is almost always really close to 100%. So I'm just going to keep it the same as what we had budgeted for last year, even though it usually comes in higher than that. It's not one that you can estimate exactly, but as with everything on here, I always try to stay on the conservative side, as well as our town administrators feels the same way. Local option sales tax. This is going to be the one where I have no idea, honestly. I'm looking at things coming from the North Carolina League of Municipalities, listening to what the LGC is saying. What I base it off of was they're saying that it is going to be less, probably around 10%, but there is no real direction. So I did it a little bit less, right at the 10% less. This will probably be adjusted. I don't know if it's going to go down or up. And that I have another webinar tomorrow afternoon that is going to talk about it some more. But I have been watching it, and pretty much everybody is saying, I don't know. So that's best guess right now, or best educated guess is what my projection is. So there are projections for the utility sales tax, electricity, telecommunications, video programming. The electricity will probably be a little bit higher than what I projected in this because I had some other information come through. So that could actually remain the same at the 375. So that's one that we can adjust before we actually make this the draft budget back up to 375. The other two are staying in line with what the League of Municipality is saying. They're saying that the beer and wine tax should stay the same. Solid waste is very minimal, but within 1%. And so that's, just dollars. The county fire district fees, that comes from the county. So that projection, that revenue is what they are saying it is going to be. And then the other two, there hasn't been any change or any talk of any change. The ABC local. So building permits and building inspection fees, we budgeted these at about 130 and 110 last year. The budget that you see for 1920 is our amended budget, and then we had done a budget amendment to increase these because they have been coming in higher. So I think the economy is going to play a huge part in where these fees come in. So obviously if the community or the economy goes down or doesn't recover as quickly, building is going to decrease. So I didn't put them as high as what they're coming in this year. I kept them pretty close to what we had said last year. I still think that they'll probably come in right around what these numbers are. The other ones I really didn't change. The certificate occupancy, zoning fees, they're very minimal revenues, like fees. Service charges. So the recycling program will be as close to or equal to what our expenses are. So I just try to, if we have more customers, then the revenue will be higher. If we have less, it'll be lower, but our expenses will be lower as well. So that will kind of adjust itself, but that's where it's sort of coming in this year, and our costs will be higher next year, so the revenue will be higher next year. The rest of these are very subjective. So special event fees, we budgeted at 3,000. It typically does come in higher than that, and depending on how long we're closed for everything, that's going to depend on this too. So I kept it at 3,000, even though it usually does come in a lot higher. And the same with the wheelchair rentals. We get quite a few, but it depends on how long our beaches are going to stay closed. And then fire inspections or police fines, and that just depends on compliance. And fire inspections will pretty much stay the same because people need their annual fire inspections. Court facility fees and ordinance violations, they're very minimal. So I just basically kept them pretty close to what they're projected at or what we budgeted for. We don't budget for the small grants at the beginning of the year. We adjust those as they come in. Same with donations. The mosquito funds we get from the county, so when we spend it, we ask for some of the money back, and that's what that is. We don't have any special assessments. Our interest earnings in 18-19 were a lot higher. This is very subjective to the market, and with the way things look right now, there's not going to be very much interest collected until everything starts to come back open. And then payment discounts, we usually get between $1,000 and $2,000 on that. And then miscellaneous revenue is very variable. It just depends on a multitude of things. So, but it's usually at least $10,000. And then I accommodations fund is the only other revenue that we have coming into general fund. And this year we projected it at 200,000. It's probably not gonna be that coming in this year because with short-term rentals, we're losing at this point an entire month, possibly more. It will be less, but I'm projecting next year to have a transfer of maybe 122,000. That's based on a $400,000 revenue for that 3% portion. Last year we did 500,000, but I think that that'd be pretty much in line. I mean, the total that we bring in typically is around 500,000 for a whole year. So, and that's the revenues. And so when I went through the budget, I took out all capital. Pretty much everything that everybody asked for has been taken out of the budget. For council, you'll see the changes that were made. And it's within $3,000, the revenues versus the budget at this point, which is really close. And that's actually $3,000 more in revenues than expenditures. So you would just adjust your revenues or increase your expenditures. It just has to be balanced. But at this point, that's what I have. And so going through these webinars that I've gone to and Zoom calls and School of Government and everybody trying to figure out what all of this budgeting is going to look like this year, this is basically what everybody has suggested. There's some that have talked about doing an interim budget, but then you can't set your property tax rate and it's only operating and it's very temporary, like less than a month. I don't suggest doing that at all. With this, we would have a balanced budget. That's our requirement. And just do a budget amendment. As revenues come in, if they come in higher, we do a budget amendment and see what the strongest needs are as far as if we bring the capital in, we don't bring it in, or what exactly we do outside of this pretty basic budget that we have. So is there any questions?
Councilman Nern, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. This was good, Tara. I think this is what we asked you to do.
Just sort of clarification. What you're saying here is this is basically purely an operating budget. Keep the town running, keep the services going, pretty much at the level that we have had now, keep the personnel at the same level, no equipment acquisitions, no additional infrastructure, although there is some stormwater and that work in here.
Yeah, let me see. The stormwater, it still has a decrease from last year.
Yeah.
I know that was, a big focus for the town, so we still have infrastructure repair for that and infrastructure repair for streets. That I did keep in there, which is something that we can take out, but I didn't think it was.
At this point, we don't need to. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
At this point, we basically have this year's budget with projected revenues for next year being still lower and decreased. There's just, it's still keeping the same services we provide, but also some increased stormwater projects and keeping the paving services that we provided so we don't get off schedule. And that's been all be able to work out best that we can tell from the revenues without knowing fully the extent of how North Carolina in general is going to be affected.
Which we won't know
Yeah.
before the end of this fiscal year.
Yeah.
So typically, the sales tax revenue is at least a month behind. So right now, I know what February came in at, and February wasn't affected. And so I don't know what March looks like yet, or April, obviously, because we're still in that. But so, and then at the end of the year, some of these revenues for this fiscal year, like Hiram and I have already talked about and had talked to the department heads, basically put a freeze on spending, just because we're not 100% sure what sales tax is going to come in, and that's one of our main revenues. And so to protect us through the end of this fiscal year, we have put in safeguards for that. And then it's going to be 3 to 6 months after the new budget starts that we'll have an idea of what this really looks like, or what the effect really looks like to us. I mean, accurate. I mean, we'll have projections and estimates, and there's experts, but
Yeah, and so all of the various oversight agencies within the state that kind of look at how we manage our money are comfortable with basically this method of keeping the operating as it is.
Yeah,
And
you just
then
have to
as
do-
the year goes on if we have money, and two, if we have a legitimate requirement that needs to be filled, we do budget amendments to address those as they come up.
yeah, even in times that aren't like this, we do budget amendments.
Yeah, but we try
So
to
there-
minimize those.
You do try to minimize
Yeah,
those,
but-
exactly. But with this, we are estimating revenues to our best ability.
Yeah.
And so that's what you have to do for a budget, is estimate your revenues to your best ability. And so if in this time, there is no best ability.
Yeah.
So, and every government agency from all the way to the federal level, they realize that, because nobody really knows exactly what this is going to look like. So this is our best ability.
Our 2021 budget, or our audit for next year's budget, isn't going to get gigged from doing multiple budget
Right.
amendments.
Okay.
If that's
Yeah,
the
that's
concern.
kind of where it was
Yeah,
going.
we're not going to get slapped on the wrist for it, because everybody should be in the same boat.
Well, we also won't be pulling from fund balance. So that's where the issue comes in with budget amendments, if you're pulling from fund balance, but we're not planning on doing that. So as revenues come in above what we estimated, we'll be doing budget amendments to those actual revenues that we have received. So we're not taking from our fund balance. That's what you want to prevent, is doing a bunch of budget amendments that pulls from your fund balance. So it's a different type of budget amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be matching revenues with expenditures as
Right.
we amend.
And so with this, we're not talking about changing our tax rate.
No.
We keep the tax rate at the same level.
We
Yes.
kind of need to keep the tax rate at the same level. I mean, this year's current operating budget is already a bare bones budget using that tax rate. So next year, with even more uncertainty with sales tax, to change our tax rate, I assume by lowering is the question, would cripple us.
So is there anything else the council's supposed to do today?
I was gonna let the other one, Councilman Borman, would you like to questions or comments or suggestions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The fire fees, I know that they're set by the county, but do they set them based on our proposed budget, or how do they come up with that figure? Do you know?
We will send them a budget, but the number they come up with is based on the buildings in town at the time they do their calculation, which is based on square footage.
There is no change in fire fees this year.
Well, they're going to go up in the projection for next year.
Just the revenue.
Yeah,
but
right,
not
just
to
the revenue.
Not the cost to the people.
Right.
There's no change in the rate.
Could you explain that, Tara? Because
There's been more construction. As more buildings come in, the more fire fees will be collected, because it's based on the square footage on the property.
I see. Okay, I get it.
But we're
I
not
get it.
proposing to have the fire department's budget go up. That money would hopefully go into its capital line to pay for future expenses.
I got it. Okay.
Anything else, sir?
One other question about some of the detail in here. When you talk about merit increase for the departments, that's a cost of living increase?
So that's based on performance. So I do it at the 3%, which is, I mean, I'm not deciding that. That's absolutely a council decision, 100%. I put it in at 3%. That was what had been done last year.
Last year.
And so that's not a definite cost, because if an employee has a lower performance level, then they would get a less percentage.
But we still budget towards the max so
Yeah,
that we
you
know that
always-
the money's there. But as Ms. Drop's saying, not every employee traditionally has performed to the maximum merit increase. We don't use it as a COLA.
Okay, and would that hold for the bonus as well?
Bonus is just a set amount, or it has been always just a
It's
set amount.
every full-time employee gets a bonus if that's what the council decides to choose. We left that in there because we weren't sure where to take out, if y'all wanted it out or not.
Yeah,
We
that's a
didn't-
council.
That's a council decision, but we didn't want to go ahead and make that decision like we did with the rest of the cuts.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether, well, I mean, to some extent, it will depend on what's going to happen after all this stuff settles down, I suppose.
Yeah, we can still budget it and doesn't necessarily mean that y'all will approve it.
The other,
Okay.
I just want to make one more comment with this. The other thing that has been suggested is we can go ahead and do the public hearing whenever you want to with a draft budget. Like you can call for it on May 4th, but then wait until the end of June to actually pass the budget because things can change and we can see a difference. There just has to be a draft budget out for a certain period of time before it can be adopted. So this is the closest that we believe that it's going to be. And the town will still be informed, the citizens will still be informed of what the changes are if we make changes, but we can make changes even after it's been set out for the town, presented to the town, put in the paper, wherever we have to put this out to. We can make changes all the way up until it's adopted. But everything is saying that we need to wait until the end of June to actually adopt this, because that's when the longer we wait, the better understanding we'll have of where we're at. So I mean, you can add and take away and move around even after this has been presented as a draft budget.
And with that said, we'll be, like we said during the disposition of directives, we'll be coming in May 4th to ask you to set a public hearing for June 1st on a draft budget. We'll make that draft available on May 4th, and it can still change after that public hearing. But going ahead and get that public hearing out of the way, letting the public go ahead and speak on it will help us also make those changes before we finally adopt it later in the month.
So would we be looking at adopting it at the second meeting on the 16th, or looking at setting up a special meeting like on the 26th or 29th, 30th of
Either
June?
or. I wouldn't propose to adopt it before the 16th, but we've talked about asking for a special meeting probably on the 29th, to be honest. Just to give us the maximum amount of time to make sure that we've got a workable budget for next year.
And we don't have to do that right now. I do have more meetings coming up and more direction, and just as time, because I mean, it feels like we've been in this for a really long time, but it really hasn't been that long. So everybody's still trying to figure out what exactly is happening and what is going to happen. And so every week there's new information that comes out for the finance side of this, and I'm sitting in a class or watching a webinar and trying to see what exactly we should do. This is really just letting you know what our options are, what they're saying at this point. It could definitely change within 2 weeks. But May 4th, I think setting the public hearing and having the draft out and actually available to the public is our best practice at this point, and then just kind of go with the flow after that and see what happens.
Yeah.
One other question, Tara. What is OBIT update? What is OBIT?
Orbit, I spelled it wrong in one of the pages, but it's Orbit. It's our retirement that we're set in through the state, and we got updated rates from them.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I noticed that yesterday.
Anything else?
I didn't catch it.
Anything else, Councilman Borman?
No, that's it, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Phillips, do you have anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything?
Well, I'm good with this, but I would really like to see us try to give some little reduction in our taxes. understood our town administrator correctly, that's impossible.
It's not impossible. It's a matter of if we do reduce it, we'll have to drop something or someone. We're at a point with our taxes that are covering, it's helping to barely cover the minimum services that we provide.
I think even at this point, even with projections being lower, we wouldn't have been able to have much capital in this budget anyways,
Yeah.
with where we stand. I mean, our projections aren't that much lower than they would have been, maybe a couple 100,000, but in order to have capital, it would have to be out of fund balance.
In my professional opinion, which is not going to be a popular opinion, these taxes are considerably low, providing what we do for this town. We could do so much more with just a few more pennies, just to be honest. But at the same time, we're doing our best to keep it as low as possible for the citizens of this town. And that unfortunately means if you want to go lower, we do have to drop services.
Well, it seems to me you reduced the budget considerably from last year's, and I have a little difficulty understanding why we can't reduce taxes as well.
It's because I took all of the capital. I completely took all of the capital out of this budget. So there's no vehicle purchases, there's no equipment purchases, there's no additional staff. I mean, I basically, I think I took out like $1.3 million.
1.39487.
And don't forget the adjusted budget also includes our purchase of the land next door,
Yeah,
which was not in the original budget last year.
right.
Yeah. I cannot justify raising the taxes, nor can I justify lowering the taxes. So at this point, with all the uncertainties, my view is keep the taxes at the same rate.
Councilman Boardman, you need to add anything? Or maybe you're just drinking water? You're muted,
sir.
I think, sir.
Sorry, I was just drinking water.
Sorry, I seen you raise your hand. I thought you was.
No, I was drinking water. Thanks.
Councilman Phillips, you have anything else?
Nothing else to add, but I agree with Mr. Corbett.
Councilman Nern?
We, it's up to the citizens really what they want to give up in order for us to lower taxes. And the way things are going, you have to look in the future. What we may have to raise taxes next year because of the shortfall in revenues if you want to continue the same services. It's what the people are willing to give up. At this point in the economy, I can't see raising taxes, but I definitely can't see lowering them.
Councilman Corbett, you have anything else to add?
I'm finished.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything else?
No, I said my piece.
Okay. With that being said, Tara, I just want to tell you thank you. I'm appreciative for what you've come back with. I know this is unforeseen times. I think you've done an excellent job. The way I look at it, off the budget that was presented to us at first, it's $1,394,872, and off of our budget from last year, it's $575,000 off that. I appreciate what you do for us. I think it's very good. I think you've done the best you can do in the situation that we're in. I just want to tell you we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
We all do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
what happens now?
So this right now is where it sits. If there's anything else on here that any of you see that you would like me to change at this point, I can change that. And then on May 4th, bring any revisions that you have, and that's when we would basically, I mean, it's available to the public because we have it in the agenda packet, things like that. But so it would be out for public viewing, and we set the public hearing, and kind of see what happens over the next month after that. So if there's any changes now that you currently see, I can go ahead and update those before May 4th.
Otherwise, this is the draft budget without those changes.
Right.
If you come with changes at May 4th, whatever y'all decide that night would be the draft budget. If we get them before the next agenda packet goes out, we can make that the draft budget. But basically, it needs to be a consensus of everybody, not just one person sending this, I'd like to see this
Right,
change.
yeah, it has to be a
So if y'all have
consensus for a
anything that you
change.
do think that you want to talk about today, let's go ahead and discuss it.
I do have a question that
Okay.
comes up. If I read this right, somewhere in there was the natural disaster reimbursement funds,
Right.
Is
So that
environmental
is-
protection?
and I'm yes, environmental protection. Okay, you kept 50,000 in?
Right.
Okay.
We had talked about 100,000.
Yeah, but you kept
But I
50,000.
figured for
Okay.
budgeting reasons, we'll keep it the same as last year.
And to be clear, what that is the money that we have at hand in case there's a disaster so that we can immediately start
Doing something.
recovery.
Yeah.
And then that fact that we are showing good faith and making an effort and funding recovery helps our argument when we go to FEMA with our overall cost, what we're putting in for a claim.
Right.
Okay.
It's essentially startup capital to do something prior to us looking at reimbursements.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any comments, questions, or suggestions?
I had one more question. Go ahead. Did any of the departments, anybody raise any capital item that they felt was absolutely needed in order to be able to do their job this coming year?
We told them that they could not.
Okay, so the answer is no.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, to answer that question, though, I'd say probably about 75% of everything that was presented before, let's take personnel out of it. Equipment, I'd say at least 100% of the equipment, minus the personnel, new equipment, is necessary. The amount of stuff that we want to get done, such as the track hoe and things like that. Again, we'll end up renting it for the next year when we finally work on those projects. It'll give us less hands-on and more contract work. So that's the trade-off. It's necessary to do more stuff inside as a priority, but it's not a priority to get the job done. It's basically if you want to pay the contractor more to do the work.
Yeah.
So with that being said, like I said, minus the personnel costs, just about everything was a priority. The personnel can be considered priority to make things easier, to provide more enforcement, to provide easier transition, to get us ready and pumped to the next stage. But as I said, we're not raising taxes. And if we want to lower taxes, we'd have to cut people and services. So we also were already looking at not adding the new personnel this year anyway, knowing that we weren't going to be raising taxes.
Thank you.
But I don't want you to get caught up on what is a priority and what's not all the time with this. It's what we can make work and what would make work better. And that's why I would consider certain things a priority, even if it may not seem like a priority. If we can provide a better service at an easier rate and with just a few extra, hands on deck or equipment, that becomes an essential priority in my book. But not one we can't work without, because clearly this year we've worked without.
That being said, Councilman Borman, you have anything else?
No, nothing else for me.
Councilman Phillips, you have anything else?
Nothing else for me.
Councilwoman Harris, do you have anything else?
No.
Councilman Nern?
No.
And Councilman Corbett?
No.
Okay. Then I call do I have a motion that we reset?
So moved.
Actually, we don't have enough. We can adjourn this. We don't have
can
another
just adjourn
budget
it?
meeting
Okay.
at this time.
Do I have a motion we adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Borman?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Thank you, sirs. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Ms. Tara. Thank y'all.
Thank you.